Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world where the sun rises far too early, the air already smells faintly of smoke and animals, and your body aches before you've even had the chance to complain about it. You're lying on a rough mattress that's more suggestion than comfort, packed with straw that crackles every time you shift your weight. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is yelling like it's personally offended by your existence. This is medieval morning, and you are not ready for it. You probably won't survive this, or at least, you won't enjoy it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere cozy and modern, feel free to drop your location and local time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up not because you're rested, not because you've had a full night's sleep, but because the day has decided it's time. Medieval life doesn't believe in easing you awake. There's no snooze button, no soft alarm tone. The light creeping through the cracks of the wooden shutters is your signal, along with the cold. The cold is immediate, like it's been waiting patiently all night just for you to open your eyes. You sit up slowly because standing too fast makes the world spin. Historians still argue whether medieval people were chronically sleep deprived or simply used to fragmented rest, but either way, you don't feel refreshed. You feel used, the kind of tired that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. Your back protests, your neck feels stiff, and your feet are already dreading the floor. When you finally swing your legs over the side of the bed, your toes meet packed dirt or rough wooden planks. Either way, it's freezing. Floors in medieval homes weren't exactly designed with warmth in mind. Even in wealthier households, insulation is more concept than reality. Fireplaces exist, yes, but they're more decorative at this hour than helpful. The fire went out sometime in the night, and nobody bothered to keep it alive for the sake of your comfort. You pause for a moment, just sitting there, listening. The sounds of morning leak in through the walls, animals shifting, carts rattling, distant voices already awake and busy. The day has started without you, and it's mildly offended you're late, even though, objectively, you are not. Mainstream history tells us that medieval people often rose at dawn because daylight was precious, candles were expensive, and oil lamps weren't something you wasted on sleeping in. A quirky little tidbit though. In some regions, people practice something like first sleep and second sleep, waking briefly in the middle of the night before drifting off again. That sounds cozy until you realize it still doesn't involve sleeping past sunrise. You stand up and immediately regret it. The room tilts slightly, and you steady yourself against a wooden beam that's splintered from decades of use. Your clothes are nearby, folded, or maybe just stacked in a hopeful pile. They're cold too. Everything is cold. Even the air feels damp, like it's been sitting still all night, collecting chill. As you pull on your clothing, you notice how heavy it feels. Wool, mostly. Thick, scratchy, unapologetic wool. It smells faintly of smoke and whatever animal it once came from. There's no softness here, no stretch, no comfort. Getting dressed is an act of endurance, not style. You tug and adjust, already mildly irritated, and it's not even properly morning yet. You step outside or into a shared space, and the cold follows you like a personal vendetta. Breath fogs the air. Somewhere, someone is already coughing, a deep, chesty sound that feels ominous. You remind yourself vaguely that life expectancy wasn't exactly stellar. Historians still argue whether medieval living conditions were uniformly miserable or varied significantly by region and class. But standing here now, you feel pretty confident about your own opinion. The smell hits you next. Smoke, animals, unwashed bodies, damp earth. It's not overpowering yet, but it's there, like background noise for your nose. You'd probably stop noticing it eventually. Probably. For now, it's just another reason you're already mentally exhausted. There's work to be done. There is always work to be done. Morning isn't a gentle suggestion, it's a demand. Whether you're a peasant, a craftsperson, or part of a household staff, your value is directly tied to how quickly you can start moving. Lingering is frowned upon. Complaining is pointless. Stretching dramatically and sighing like you do now would earn you a look, at best. You shuffle along, still half awake, wondering vaguely how people did this every single day without losing their minds. Maybe they did lose their minds. Maybe that's the secret no one tells you. A light joke crosses your thoughts. At least no one expects you to be productive before coffee, except, oh wait, coffee won't exist here for centuries. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings. Church bells are the medieval equivalent of notifications, except you can't mute them. They tell you the time, the rhythm of the day, when to work, when to pray, when to stop. Right now, it's just another reminder that you belong to the schedule, not the other way around. As you move through the early morning tasks, fetching water, tending animals, preparing tools, you realize how physical everything is. There's no shortcut, no automation. Every small action requires effort. Lifting, carrying, bending. Your muscles warm up reluctantly, protesting the sudden demand. This is the part modern people romanticize until they actually have to do it. Historians still argue whether medieval laborers were physically stronger on average due to constant activity or simply more worn down. Standing here, hands already rough, you suspect it's a bit of both. Strength earned through necessity, paid for with aching joints. By the time the sun is properly above the horizon, you're already done. Not done with the day, done emotionally. You glance at the sky, calculating. It's not even noon, not close. And yet, you feel like you've lived several small lifetimes since waking up. This is the moment you realize something important. This isn't about surviving dragons or battles or dramatic plagues. It's about surviving the ordinary, the quiet grind of discomfort, cold, hunger, and effort. You're already over medieval life, and the day has barely begun. And as you take a slow breath, steadying yourself for what comes next, you can't help but think, noon feels very far away. You drift forward into the next unavoidable reality of the morning, hygiene, or what passes for it here. If you were hoping for a refreshing reset after that cold wake-up, this is where medieval life really starts testing your patience. You approach a basin, wooden, shallow, already used by someone else earlier, and the water inside looks experienced. Not dirty exactly, just tired, like it's seen too much and doesn't want to talk about it. You splash your face anyway, because you're supposed to. The water is shockingly cold, the kind that makes your sinuses question their life choices. There's no running tap, no adjusting temperature. You take what you're given. Your hands come away numb, your face damp, and somehow you feel less clean than before. That's an impressive trick, honestly. Mainstream historical fact time, slipping in quietly. Most medieval people did wash, contrary to popular myth. They weren't walking around intentionally filthy. Bathing existed, public bathhouses existed, and cleanliness was associated with health and morality in many regions. The problem wasn't ignorance, it was logistics. Clean water takes work, fuel takes money, and time is already in short supply. You glance around and realize this basin is communal, multiple faces, same water. It's a shared experience in the most literal sense. There's something deeply humbling about that, and not in a good way. You resist the urge to wipe your face on your sleeve because your sleeve is arguably worse. Soap, if it exists at all, is rough and alkaline, made from animal fat and ash. It smells faintly aggressive. Using it feels less like pampering and more like negotiating a truce with your skin. You scrub your hands, feeling the grit under your nails, and accept that clean enough is the goal. Spotless is a fantasy reserved for people who haven't lived here. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some medieval recipes for soap included herbs like rosemary or lavender, mostly to mask the smell rather than improve cleanliness. Early attempts at scented hygiene, less luxury spa, more please don't recoil. It's the ancestor of modern body spray logic, really. You consider your teeth next. This is a brief consideration. There's no toothbrush waiting for you, no minty reward. Some people chewed on twigs to clean their teeth. Others rubbed them with cloth or used powders made from crushed herbs or even bone ash. Historians still argue whether these methods were effective or just made people feel proactive. Either way, your mouth tastes like sleep and yesterday's bread, and that's just how it's going to be. You rinse your mouth with water, spit discreetly, and move on. Lingering too long on personal comfort is a luxury you can't afford. There's already motion around you, others washing quickly, shaking off water, heading back to work. No one is savoring the moment. This isn't self-care, it's maintenance. Your hair is another negotiation. Combs exist, yes, but they're functional, not forgiving. You drag one through carefully, feeling the tug. Lice are a known enemy here, an unspoken background concern. People covered their hair, braided it tightly, or shaved parts of it not for fashion, but for survival. You smooth things down as best you can, and accept that presentable is relative. The smell of the space lingers as you move. Damp wood, human bodies, faint smoke. It's not unbearable, but it's persistent, like a song stuck in your head that you didn't choose. You realize this scent will follow you through the morning, clinging to your clothes, settling into your hair. Modern deodorant would be revolutionary here. You'd be hailed as a wizard. You'd give up a lot for just 5 minutes with a hot shower and citrus soap. Light joke number 2, even the water seems annoyed to be awake this early. Light joke number 3 waits patiently because timing matters. You dry your face with a cloth that's been used many times before. It's rough, thin, and smells faintly of whoever owned it last. You pat instead of rub, because rubbing feels like it might start a fight. Your skin tightens as it dries, and you're aware of every sensation. Medieval life doesn't let you forget your body. It reminds you constantly. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how often medieval people bathed, varying wildly by region, climate, and class. Some historians point to frequent bathing in cities with bathhouses, especially before certain moral panics shut them down. Others emphasize rural life, where bathing might be seasonal rather than daily. Standing here now, you suspect the truth is complicated and also very cold. You step away from the basin, making room for the next person. There's no mirror, no final check. You trust that you look approximately human and move on. The concept of feeling fresh hasn't been invented yet. You feel damp, slightly itchy, and very aware of the air on your skin. As you walk back toward the work area, you notice how quickly your hands are already dirty again. One touch of wood, one brush against an animal, and whatever cleanliness you achieved is immediately undone. It's almost funny. Almost. Hygiene here is less about staying clean and more about briefly resetting before entropy wins again. This is the moment when modern frustration really kicks in. You haven't eaten properly, you haven't warmed up, and now you've done your best to wash with water that feels like it resents you. And yet, everyone around you treats this as normal. No complaints, no commentary, just quiet acceptance and forward motion. You feel a tiny spark of admiration, followed immediately by a wave of irritation. Adaptation is impressive. Endurance is admirable, but also, this is a lot. And it's still morning. As the sounds of work grow louder and the day gains momentum, you realize something important. Hygiene isn't a refreshing pause here. It's just another task, another reminder that comfort is not the priority. Function is, survival is, everything else is optional. You take one last steadying breath, the smell of smoke and damp air filling your lungs, and prepare to move on. Your face is clean enough, your hands are workable, your expectations are officially lowered, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet, cranky thought settles in. You're not even close to noon yet. You finally reach the part of the morning you've been quietly bargaining with yourself about: breakfast. or at least the medieval interpretation of it. Your stomach has been making low, disapproving noises for a while now, and you take that as a sign that it's time. Not time for pleasure, just time to stop the complaints from getting louder. Food in the morning is simple, aggressively simple. There's no spread, no options, no "what are you in the mood for today?" There is bread. There is almost always bread, dark, dense, and heavy enough that you're fairly certain it could be used as a building material in an emergency. This isn't the fluffy, forgiving bread you know. This is the kind that reminds your jaw it has responsibilities. Mainstream historical fact slides in quietly here. Medieval bread varied by class. Wealthier households enjoyed white bread made from finely sifted wheat flour, while most people ate darker loaves mixed with rye, barley, or oats. You are not eating the fancy kind. Your bread is brown, coarse, and full of texture, some intentional, some mysterious. You tear off a piece. Tearing is important because slicing requires a knife, and knives are busy being tools, not conveniences. The bread smells faintly sour, a result of natural fermentation. You chew slowly, because chewing quickly would be a mistake. Your jaw works like it's warming up for a marathon. You can feel individual grains, possibly a pebble. You decide not to investigate, to wash it down. There's ale, not the fun kind. This is small beer, low alcohol, cloudy, and brewed quickly. It exists because water can't always be trusted, and fermentation feels safer. You take a sip. It's lukewarm. Of course it is. Refrigeration is a distant dream. The taste is flat, vaguely grainy, and oddly filling. A quirky little tidbit floats up. Children drank small beer too. It was safer than water, and weak enough not to cause trouble. Historians still argue how intoxicating daily medieval drinking really was, but right now, you're just grateful it doesn't taste actively hostile. There might be something extra if you're lucky. A bit of cheese, sharp and crumbly, maybe leftover pottage from the night before, a thick stew of grains and vegetables, reheated and resigned to its fate. You take a spoonful and feel the warmth spread slowly, doing its best to counteract the morning cold. It helps. A little. What's missing is just as noticeable as what's here. No sugar, no fruit, unless it's in season and nearby. No coffee, no tea, no gentle stimulation to ease your brain into the day. You are waking up raw, fueled by carbohydrates and determination. You eat standing up or sitting on a low bench because furniture isn't designed for lingering. Breakfast is functional. The faster you finish, the sooner you can get back to work. This is not a moment anyone stretches out. Even conversation is minimal. People chew, swallow, move on. You'd trade 3 loaves of this bread for 1 modern croissant without hesitation. Your jaw is getting more exercise than the rest of you combined. As you eat, you notice how filling this food is. That's intentional. Medieval diets were built around energy, not enjoyment. Calories mattered more than flavor. You can feel the heaviness settle in your stomach, a slow-burning fuel that will have to last. There are no snacks later. This is it for a while. Historians still argue about medieval nutrition, whether people were chronically malnourished or simply adapted to different standards. The truth seems to be that diets were monotonous but sufficient most of the time, punctuated by scarcity. Standing here now, you're not starving, but you're also not thrilled. You're sustained. You wipe your hands on a cloth or your clothes because napkins are a luxury and soap is work. Crumbs cling to your fingers. Your mouth tastes like grain and effort. You swallow the last bite and feel the quiet pressure of expectation return. Breakfast is over. That was quick. The absence of choice is what really gets to you. Not the taste, not even the texture. It's knowing that tomorrow's breakfast will be almost identical, and the next day, and the next. Variety is seasonal, rare, and unpredictable. Comfort food, as a concept, hasn't really formed yet. You glance around at the others finishing their meals. No one complains. No one comments. This is normal. You wonder if modern people would adapt eventually or just become permanently cranky. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced food emotionally the way we do now, or if survival-focused eating shaped a different relationship entirely. You stand, feeling the weight of the food settle. It helps with the cold, at least. Your hands are steadier. Your body feels ready enough to continue. Ready enough is the standard here. As you step away from the eating area, you realize something subtle but important. Breakfast didn't make you happy. It didn't comfort you. It simply stopped the hunger, and that feels like a theme. You take one last look at the bread, already drying at the edges, and turn back toward the work waiting for you. The sun is climbing slowly. The day is officially underway, and somewhere between the last swallow of ale and the first step back into labor, it hits you. This is the best part of the morning so far. That's concerning. You square your shoulders, adjust your clothes, and move forward. Noon is still far away, and you're already counting the hours. You turn your attention fully to your clothes now, because once breakfast is done, there's no escaping how they feel. They've been on your body since dawn, but only now, warm from movement, stiff from wear, do they really introduce themselves. This is not the kind of clothing that disappears when you forget about it. Medieval clothes demand constant awareness, like a needy roommate. The first thing you notice is the weight. Everything is heavier than you expect. Wool dominates your outfit, thick and dense, woven for durability, not comfort. It presses down on your shoulders and hips, a constant reminder that this fabric was made to last years, not to feel nice against your skin. You shift slightly, and the seams tug back, unimpressed. Mainstream historical fact slips in gently here. Wool was the most common textile in medieval Europe because it was warm, relatively water-resistant, and easier to produce locally than linen or silk. Linen existed, yes, especially for undergarments, but it still wasn't soft in the way you're imagining. Even your base layer feels like it has opinions. You scratch absent-mindedly at your arm and immediately regret it. The wool responds with a sharp itch, like it's offended by your audacity. You stop scratching and try to ignore it instead, which is the medieval solution to many problems. Ignoring discomfort is practically a life skill here. Buttons are rare. Zippers, obviously, are science fiction. Your clothes are tied, laced, or belted into place. Getting dressed earlier took time, and getting undressed tonight will too. Everything is adjustable, but nothing is convenient. You're aware of every knot, every fold, every place where fabric rubs just a little wrong. A quirky tidbit drifts through your thoughts. Medieval people often owned very few sets of clothes, sometimes just one main outfit and a spare. Clothes were valuable, repaired constantly, and passed down. That hole in your sleeve? It's not a flaw, it's a work in progress. You feel suddenly grateful for modern fast fashion, and then a little guilty about it. Footwear deserves its own moment of resentment. Your shoes are leather, stiff, and flat. There's no cushioning, no arch support, no mercy. They protect your feet from the ground technically, but that's where their generosity ends. Each step sends a clear message directly up your legs. The ground is uneven, and your shoes want you to know it. Your modern sneakers would be considered suspiciously magical here. Light joke number 2. Your feet are already drafting a formal complaint. Light joke number 3 will arrive once you've walked a little more. You walk, and the clothes move with you in a way that feels reluctant. Nothing stretches, nothing forgives. When you bend, the fabric resists. When you lift your arms, it pulls. The outfit isn't designed for comfort during motion. It's designed to survive motion. Big difference. Historians still argue whether medieval clothing was more practical than we give it credit for, or simply endured because there was no alternative. Some point out clever tailoring techniques that allowed movement and warmth. Others emphasize how often people complained about itchiness and restriction in surviving texts. You, personally, are leaning toward the second camp. You become aware of heat next. Even on a cool morning, the layers trap warmth quickly once you start moving. There's no removing a jacket and tying it around your waist. Layers are part of the system. Sweat builds, especially during labor, and there's nowhere for it to go. The fabric absorbs it and holds on. And once it's damp, it stays damp. There's no quick dry fabric here. You can feel the chill creep back in when you pause, the moisture cooling against your skin. It's an endless cycle, cold, then hot, then cold again. Your clothes orchestrate the whole thing without asking for your input. You catch a glimpse of others dressed much like you, variations in color, cut, and quality depending on class, but the same fundamental issues. No one looks especially comfortable. Some look practiced, moving efficiently despite the constraints. You look newer at this. There's also the matter of cleanliness. These clothes aren't washed often. Water, soap, and time all cost effort. Spot cleaning is common. Full washing happens when absolutely necessary. You're aware of yesterday lingering in the fabric, smoke, sweat, work. The smell isn't shocking, it's just constant. Historians still argue how often medieval people washed clothing versus bodies, and the answer seems to be less than you'd like, more than you'd fear. Either way, you're wearing history, literally, layer by layer. As you walk, your belt digs slightly into your waist. Belts are functional, holding tools, pouches, sometimes even small knives. They redistribute weight in a way that makes sense practically, but feels awkward at first. Everything you carry is on you. There are no pockets the way you know them. Pockets, as a concept, are still finding their way into fashion. You reach up to adjust your collar, which is already irritating your neck. The fabric scratches, and you swear it gets worse when you pay attention to it. You try not to think about lice, about fleas, about all the tiny life forms that historically enjoyed medieval clothing almost as much as humans did. Almost. You miss clothes that don't double as personality tests. The colors around you are muted. Browns, grays, dull reds, faded blues. Bright dyes exist but are expensive and status-coded. What you wear signals who you are, where you belong, and what you can afford. There's no dressing for fun. Your outfit is a resume you can't edit. As the morning progresses, you stop adjusting your clothes and start adapting your movements instead. You learn quickly how to bend without pulling, how to lift without strain, how to walk without blisters forming too fast. Your body learns the rules because it has to. This is where a strange respect creeps in. Medieval clothing isn't cruel on purpose. It's the result of materials, technology, and priorities that don't include your comfort. Durability matters. Warmth matters. Social signaling matters. Comfort is negotiable. You glance down at yourself one more time, brushing off a bit of dirt that immediately replaces itself. The clothes are winning this relationship. You're just along for the ride. As you continue forward into the workday, you realize that your outfit isn't just something you're wearing, it's something you're enduring. And that endurance, layered over cold mornings, scratchy fabrics, and already tired muscles, is starting to add up. The sun is higher now. Your stomach is full enough. You're dressed for the day whether you like it or not. And as you take another careful step in those unforgiving shoes, the thought settles in again. Noon is still a long way off, and you're already uncomfortable in ways you didn't know were possible. Work begins the moment everyone agrees, silently, that it has already begun. There's no ceremonial start, no easing into it. You simply find yourself doing something useful, because not doing something useful is noticeable, and being noticeable in the wrong way is never a good idea. Medieval mornings don't ask how you're feeling. They assume you're capable and proceed accordingly. You take stock of your role, farming, most likely, or assisting with it in some way. Even if your primary identity is something else, a craftsperson, an apprentice, a household worker, agriculture still hovers over everything. Food production is the spine of the world here. The land dictates the schedule and you obey. Mainstream historical fact slides in calmly. The vast majority of medieval people worked in agriculture, and their days were structured around seasonal rhythms rather than fixed hours. Dawn to dusk wasn't a metaphor, it was the job description. Right now, that means you're expected to move, lift, carry, dig, tend, repair, or assist without much instruction. You pick up a tool, and it's heavier than it looks. Tools here are solid, built for durability, not ergonomics. The handle fits your hand because hands adapted to it over generations, not because anyone measured comfort. The wood is smooth in places from long use, rough in others where splinters wait patiently. The work itself is repetitive. That's the first thing you notice. Motions repeat until they blur together. Bend, lift, straighten, step, bend, lift, straighten, step. There's no background music, no podcast, no distraction beyond the rhythm of your own breathing and the occasional shout or instruction. Your mind wanders because it has nowhere else to go. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Medieval laborers often worked in groups, not just for efficiency, but for pacing. Watching others helped maintain rhythm and prevent exhaustion. It also made sure no one slacked off too obviously. You feel that social pressure immediately, nudging you to keep moving even when your arms start to ache. Sweat builds faster now. Your clothes, already warm and uncooperative, trap heat. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand and leave a faint smear of dirt behind. No one comments. Everyone looks like this. Cleanliness is a temporary state. This is the kind of workout modern fitness apps would call functional, and you would call rude. Your arms are discovering muscles they didn't know they had. Watching your posture slowly deteriorate, there's an efficiency to the work that's both impressive and exhausting. People know what they're doing. These tasks have been performed thousands of times, refined quietly over years. There's no wasted motion, no unnecessary flair, just effort, directed and continuous. Historians still argue about medieval productivity, whether people worked fewer hours than modern workers due to seasonal downtime, or whether the intensity of labor balanced it out. Right now, that debate feels abstract. What's real is the weight in your hands and the slow burn in your back. You glance up occasionally, checking the position of the sun without realizing you're doing it. Time is measured visually, not digitally. The sun's climb feels slow, almost stubborn. You calculate how long you've been working and immediately stop, because thinking about time makes it worse. There's no clear boundary between work and life. This is just life. Tasks blend into one another. Finish one thing, move to the next. There's always something else that needs doing. Fences to mend, animals to check, tools to clean, materials to prepare. Completion is temporary. Your hands are already roughening. Tiny nicks appear, barely noticeable now, but promising to sting later. Gloves exist, but they're not universal. Bare hands give better control, better feedback. You feel everything. Splinters, calluses, heat. You notice how quiet complaints are. People might grumble softly, exchange a look, crack a dry remark, but there's no sense of outrage. This isn't unfair, it's expected. You feel slightly dramatic for wanting to sigh as loudly as you do. A small breeze passes through, briefly cooling the sweat on your skin. For a moment, it's almost pleasant. You cling to that feeling longer than necessary, mentally bookmarking it as nice. It passes quickly. Historians still argue whether medieval people found satisfaction in their labor or simply accepted it. Some records suggest pride in skill, in productivity, in contributing to survival. Others hint at fatigue, resentment, and longing for rest. Standing here now, you suspect both are true, sometimes within the same hour. Your posture starts to suffer. You hunch without realizing it, shoulders creeping up, back rounding. There's no ergonomic training, no reminder to lift with your legs. You lift however you can, because the work needs doing now, not optimally. You would absolutely fake a mild injury to sit down if that were socially acceptable. It is not. Someone nearby sets the pace and you unconsciously match it. Faster than you want, slower than you fear. The group moves like a single organism, adjusting, compensating. There's a strange comfort in that. Shared effort dilutes individual misery. The sounds of work fill the air. Tools striking, animals shifting, voices calling out. It's not chaotic, it's layered. Each sound has a purpose. You learn quickly to tune out what doesn't concern you and focus on what does. Your stomach, full from breakfast, does its job. Energy flows steadily, but not generously. You're fueled, not energized. There's a difference. You can keep going, but you're not enjoying it. You catch yourself daydreaming about sitting, about warmth, about nothing at all. That's when you realize how mentally demanding this is too. Staying present matters. A moment of distraction can mean a mistake, a dropped tool, a wasted effort. Historians still argue how often medieval accidents occurred during daily labor, but common sense suggests they were frequent enough to matter. You become more careful, more deliberate. Caution slows you down, but injury would slow you more. The sun climbs higher. Shadows shorten. Sweat trickles down your back in a way that's both annoying and unavoidable. Your clothes cling slightly now, damp and heavy. You shift them, unsuccessfully. At some point, you realize you've stopped thinking in full sentences. Your thoughts are shorter, simpler. Do this, lift that, step there. It's not unpleasant. It's just narrowed. The world contracts to what's immediately in front of you. And then, almost without ceremony, you glance up again and realize something important. The sun has moved, yes, time has passed, but it's not enough, not nearly enough. You do a quick, mental calculation and feel a wave of tired disbelief wash over you. It's still morning, still solidly, unapologetically morning. This is the moment when the title really earns itself. You're already over medieval life, not in a dramatic way, not in a quitting way, just in a deeply internal, bone-level way. The kind where you keep working because you have to, but your enthusiasm quietly packs its bags and leaves. You take another breath, adjust your grip on the tool, and keep going. Noon will come eventually, you hope. And when it does, you suspect it won't feel nearly as triumphant as you imagine. By now, your hands have learned the weight of the tools whether they like it or not. You don't think about gripping anymore. Your fingers just close, adjust, and hold. That doesn't mean it's comfortable. It just means your body has accepted that resistance is pointless. The tool in your hands feels slightly unbalanced, the handle worn smooth in some places and rough in others, shaped by generations of palms that were not yours. This is where patience starts to fray, not loudly, not dramatically, but in tiny, accumulating ways. The blade isn't quite sharp enough, so every cut takes more effort than it should. You compensate without realizing it, putting more force behind each movement. Your shoulders tense, your jaw tightens. You tell yourself it's fine. Everyone else seems to manage. Mainstream historical fact slips in quietly. Medieval tools were often well made for their time, forged by skilled smiths, but they dulled quickly and required constant maintenance. Sharpening took time, and time was always borrowed from something else. A perfectly honed tool was a luxury, not a guarantee. You adjust your stance again, trying to find a rhythm that doesn't punish your back. There's no instruction manual, no diagram explaining optimal posture. You learn by watching others and copying what looks sustainable. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and your lower spine lets you know immediately. A quirky detail you become aware of is how personal tools are. Handles are carved slightly differently, balanced according to preference, repaired again and again. Losing a tool isn't just inconvenient, it's disruptive. You treat the one in your hands carefully, even as it fights you a little. The repetitive motion begins to feel meditative, right up until it doesn't. There's a point where your mind drifts and your body keeps going, and another point where both start to complain at once. You pass that second point faster than you'd like. Historians still argue whether medieval labor felt slower or faster to those living it. Some suggest the lack of clocks created a gentler sense of time. Others argue that physical strain made hours stretch endlessly. Right now, without a clock, you still know exactly how long this feels. The tool slips slightly, not dangerously, just enough to jolt your attention back. You tighten your grip, annoyed with yourself more than anything. Mistakes cost energy, and energy is precious. You reset, breathe, continue. Sweat runs down your temple, and you resist the urge to wipe it with your sleeve, knowing that'll just spread grime. You let it drip instead. It tickles. You ignore it. Ignoring discomfort is becoming a theme. Around you, the work continues steadily. No one rushes, but no one stops either. It's a pace designed to last all day, not to finish quickly. That realization settles in your chest with a weight of its own. This isn't a sprint. It's an endurance test disguised as normal life. You notice small inefficiencies that would drive modern you slightly insane. Carrying something farther than necessary. Doing tasks in an order that feels backwards. And then you realize those choices probably make sense here, shaped by terrain, habit, and communal coordination, rather than optimization theory. You don't argue, you adapt. Your hands start to sting in that dull way that promises blisters later. You flex your fingers when you can, keeping them moving. Stopping completely isn't encouraged unless there's a clear reason. Fatigue alone doesn't count. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether medieval people experienced chronic pain differently than modern people, whether they normalized it to the point of near invisibility. Standing here now, you suspect they simply had no alternative narrative. Pain wasn't a problem to solve. It was information to manage. You shift the tool to your other hand briefly, just to give the first one a break. The unfamiliar angle makes everything feel harder, slower. You switch back sooner than planned. Familiar discomfort beats unfamiliar difficulty. Somewhere nearby, someone mutters under their breath. It's not a complaint exactly, more like punctuation, a shared sound of effort. You add your own quiet exhale to the mix, and for a moment, there's a strange sense of solidarity in the soundscape. The sun continues its slow climb, and the heat builds gradually, almost politely. Your clothes trap it efficiently. You can feel the dampness spreading, the fabric growing heavier. When a breeze passes through, it cools you for half a second before making the moisture noticeable. You decide which sensation you prefer and stick with it. You think briefly about modern tools, lightweight materials, ergonomic grips, replaceable parts. The thought is comforting and deeply unhelpful. You let it go. Historians still argue how much innovation actually reached everyday workers during the medieval period. Some technologies spread quickly, others took centuries to trickle down. Right now, innovation feels theoretical. What matters is that the tool in your hands works well enough to keep going. Your pace slows slightly. You compensate by focusing more carefully on each movement, making them count. Efficiency becomes personal rather than mechanical. Less wasted motion, fewer corrections. Time does something strange here. It stretches, but not evenly. Some moments drag, others vanish entirely. You look up and realize you've been working longer than you thought. That realization is both encouraging and exhausting. Your stomach shifts, not hunger yet, just a reminder that breakfast was a while ago. You push the thought aside. Noon is the next mental milestone, not lunch itself. Noon means a pause, a breath. The idea alone keeps you moving. Your arms feel heavy now, like they belong to someone else. You lift them anyway. Your body obeys, even if your enthusiasm has quietly stepped out for fresh air. You notice how efficient everyone else looks, not because they're enjoying this, but because they've done it thousands of times. Their movements are economical, almost graceful in their repetition. You're still thinking about each action. That costs energy too. Another small slip of the tool, another correction. You tighten your grip again and feel a twinge in your wrist. You adjust your angle. This is the kind of problem solving that never ends. Fix one thing, another appears. There's no applause for good work, no acknowledgement beyond the absence of correction. You learn to interpret silence as approval. It's oddly motivating in a bleak way. Historians still argue about medieval motivation, fear, duty, faith, community. Standing here now, you think the answer is simpler. Work happens because it has to. Everything else is decoration. You straighten slowly, stretching your back as subtly as you can. It helps, but only briefly. The relief fades almost immediately. You bend again and continue. At some point, you realize your mind has gone quiet. Not peaceful exactly, but narrow and focused. There's no space for anxiety about the future or regret about the past. Just the next movement, the next task. It's almost calming if you don't examine it too closely. You glance toward the sky again. The sun is higher now, noticeably so. Progress. Actual, visible progress. It gives you a small, cautious sense of hope, and then you do the mental math. Not noon yet. The hope deflates slightly, but it doesn't disappear. You file it away, a promise deferred. You adjust your stance, shift the tool in your hands, and keep working, because that's what medieval life does best. It keeps going, and so do you. Tired, patient, already over it, but still moving forward one stubborn moment at a time. At some point, without any clear transition, you become aware of the smells, not because they suddenly appear, but because you've stopped actively ignoring them. Medieval life doesn't overwhelm your nose all at once. It introduces itself slowly, letting each scent settle in and make itself at home. The first layer is animals. They're everywhere, even when you can't see them. Horses, cows, chickens, each contributing quietly and consistently. The smell isn't shocking. It's earthy, warm, unmistakably alive. It clings to the air and to you, sinking into your clothes the same way smoke does. You've already accepted it on some level. This is a world powered by animals. They come with consequences. Mainstream historical fact slips in here. Medieval towns and villages were designed around proximity. People lived close to their animals for warmth, labor, and protection. Separate zones for livestock were more of an ideal than a rule. You're sharing space, whether you like it or not. Then there's the human layer. Sweat, breath, bodies working hard in wool and leather. It's not offensive so much as constant. Everyone smells like effort. You smell like effort. If you pause long enough to notice it, you also realize that no one else seems bothered. This is baseline. Anything cleaner would feel suspiciously empty. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. Medieval people used herbs, flowers, and even small pomanders, little scent balls, to mask odors. Not eliminate them, just negotiate with them. Rosemary, mint, lavender. You imagine how comforting a hint of lavender would be right now and immediately stop, because longing makes it worse. The street, or workspace, or shared yard adds its own notes. Damp earth, rotting plant matter, old straw, wood smoke that never fully clears the air. It's not one bad smell. It's many ordinary ones layered together, creating a background you can't step away from. Historians still argue about how sensitive medieval people were to smells compared to modern noses. Some suggest they were less bothered, acclimated through constant exposure. Others argue they were just as sensitive but lacked alternatives. Standing here now, you suspect the truth is simpler. When you can't escape something, your brain eventually files it under normal. You catch a stronger whiff of something unpleasant. Waste, probably. Human and animal waste was managed, but not invisibly. Chamber pots were emptied into streets or pits. Privies existed, but sanitation was basic at best. The smell doesn't stop work. Nothing stops work. You breathe through your mouth for a moment, then stop, because that somehow feels worse. You go back to shallow nose breaths, carefully paced. This is not a skill you expected to develop today. The smell of food drifts in briefly, someone boiling something, grain and vegetables softening together. It's comforting and frustrating at the same time. Comforting because it smells warm. Frustrating because it reminds you that eating is not happening again yet. As the day warms, the scents intensify. Heat pulls them out of everything: wood, cloth, soil. Your clothes, already damp from sweat, now hold on to smells like they're collecting souvenirs. You know, logically, that you'll stop noticing them soon. Emotionally, you're still offended. There's another scholarly debate that hovers here: whether medieval cities were truly as filthy as later writers claimed, or whether those descriptions were exaggerated by people trying to sound morally superior. You suspect both sides have a point. This isn't apocalyptic filth. It's unmanaged accumulation, a difference you feel in your sinuses. You catch yourself missing neutral smells, clean air, nothingness, the absence of information. Every breath here carries data. Your brain works quietly to sort it, then gives up and lets it all blur together. Someone passes close by, and their smell briefly overtakes yours. Then it's gone, replaced by another. It's oddly intimate, this constant proximity. Privacy doesn't exist for your nose. You know everyone a little more than you want to. You realize how much modern life relies on scent control: soap, detergent, deodorant, sealed waste systems. None of that is here in the way you expect. The world smells like itself, unfiltered. There's a moment when a breeze shifts direction and clears the air just enough to give you a glimpse of what fresh could feel like. You inhale deeply, grateful. The breeze moves on. The smells return, undisturbed. You don't gag. You don't recoil. You adjust. That's the unsettling part. Your standards are already shifting, quietly, without asking permission. What bothered you an hour ago now barely registers. Historians still argue whether this adaptability made medieval people tougher or simply more resigned. You don't feel particularly tough. You feel practiced. There's a difference. The work continues around you, unbothered by the sensory overload. Tools strike, animals move, people speak. The smells become part of the rhythm, another layer of the day you carry without comment. You realize that if noon ever comes and you sit down somewhere, the smell will sit with you. It's not something you leave behind when you stop moving. It's something you wear. That thought lands with quiet weight. Comfort here isn't about removing discomfort. It's about tolerating it well enough to keep going. You breathe again, slower this time, and let the air be what it is. You don't like it, but you accept it. That acceptance costs energy, the same way lifting and carrying does. The sun climbs higher, heat builds, smells thicken, and through it all, you keep working, adjusting, enduring. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a very modern thought forms, small but stubborn. You would give a lot for one room that smells like nothing at all. You push the thought aside and focus on the task in front of you. Noon is still coming, eventually. And until it does, this cold, heat, effort, smell is the texture of your morning. Eventually, the work you've been doing shifts into preparation for the next essential task. Food again. Not eating it, making it. The idea of stopping entirely doesn't happen. Instead, labor rearranges itself. Someone peels away to fetch water. someone else tends the fire. You're pulled into the slow machinery of medieval food preparation, which somehow manages to be both urgent and endlessly time-consuming. Grain is the center of everything. You know this intellectually, but now you feel it physically. Grain must be cleaned, dried, ground. Each step demands attention. You take your place at a quern stone or help transport sacks that feel heavier than they should. Grinding is steady, circular work. Push, turn, repeat. The stone resists just enough to remind you it's there. Mainstream historical fact settles in here. Bread and porridge formed the bulk of medieval calories, and grinding grain was daily labor, often done by hand in households without access to mills. Even when mills existed, they required transport, fees, and waiting. Convenience was relative. The grinding motion becomes hypnotic. Your arms move in circles, shoulders aching in a slow, familiar way. Flour dust rises faintly into the air, clinging to sweat on your skin. It smells dry and warm, like effort turned into sustenance. You cough once and adjust your breathing. A quirky tidbit drifts into awareness. Flour quality varied wildly, and accidental additives, sand from millstones, bits of husk, were common. This is why medieval bread was so rough on teeth. You imagine future you regretting every bite, and present you keeps grinding anyway. Fire needs tending. Someone feeds it carefully, because fuel isn't infinite. Wood is stacked, split, rationed. The fire isn't dramatic. It's controlled, coaxed. Too hot wastes fuel. Too cool wastes time. You watch the flames like they're another tool that can misbehave if ignored. Historians still argue about how much time medieval households spent on food preparation compared to modern ones. Estimates vary, but standing here now, you feel confident saying, a lot. An unreasonable amount. Enough to make eating feel earned in the most literal sense. You help carry water, sloshing carefully so you don't lose any. Each step is deliberate. Spilled water means another trip. Another trip means more time. Everything here is connected by small consequences. The smell of cooking thickens as ingredients meet heat. Pottage simmers, grains, vegetables, maybe a scrap of meat if fortune allows. It's simple, repetitive, and dependable. The same dish appears day after day, changing only slightly with season and availability. Your stomach responds immediately, hopeful and impatient. You're reminded that this is not lunch yet. This is preparation. Hunger sharpens your awareness, making every smell feel louder. You stir when asked, careful not to scorch the bottom. Burnt food wastes effort and flavor. The wooden spoon feels light compared to earlier tools, but your wrist still complains. Every movement today carries the memory of the last one. There's no multitasking in the modern sense. You do one thing fully because mistakes ripple outward. Someone watches the fire, someone grinds, someone cleans. Roles are fluid but focused. You feel oddly useful, even as fatigue creeps up again. Historians still argue whether medieval meals were communal experiences of bonding or simply functional pauses in labor. Watching this process, you suspect the bonding came later, once the work was done. Right now, it's all logistics. You notice how quiet this part of the morning is. Conversation fades as attention turns inward. The scrape of stone, the crackle of fire, the low bubble of stew replace speech. It's not peaceful, exactly, but it's contained. Flour dust settles on your sleeves. You brush it off without thinking, leaving pale streaks that immediately blend into everything else clinging to you. Cleanliness has become abstract. As the food nears readiness, not to eat, just to exist, you feel a small sense of accomplishment. Something tangible has been produced, not finished, not enjoyed, but real. Then the thought returns, unwelcome and insistent. You've been awake for hours. You've worked steadily. You've endured cold, heat, smell, effort. And all of this is still just the approach to noon. The realization doesn't crush you. It dulls you. A quiet, flattening acceptance settles in. This is how mornings work here. Long, demanding, uninterested in your opinion. You step back from the fire, letting someone else take over, and flex your fingers slowly. They ache in a deep, patient way. You breathe in the warm, grain-heavy air and prepare to move again when needed, because there's always another task, another preparation, another small demand on your attention and energy. And as the sun climbs higher, edging closer to its peak, you feel the title of this day settle fully into your bones. You're not collapsing. You're not failing. You're simply undeniably already over medieval life, and noon still hasn't arrived. The moment you've been quietly bargaining for finally arrives, not with celebration, but with a subtle shift in the light. The sun sits higher now, almost directly above you, casting shorter shadows that feel like a verdict. This is midday, or close enough that everyone collectively treats it as such. Noon doesn't announce itself. It's inferred, negotiated, sensed in tired bodies and aching joints. You straighten slowly, testing your back as you do. It answers with a dull protest, not sharp enough to stop you, but clear enough to make its point. Your muscles feel used, warmed through, and then pushed past comfort into something heavier. This is the point in the day when fatigue stops being a surprise and starts being a constant companion. Mainstream historical fact eases in here. Medieval workdays often included a midday pause, especially during long summer days. It wasn't leisure exactly, more like a necessary reset to keep people functional. The length of this pause varied wildly by season, region, and urgency. Today, it feels shorter than you'd like. You lower yourself onto a bench, a log, the ground, whatever is available and not actively moving. Sitting feels strangely unfamiliar, like your body forgot this was an option. When you finally settle, there's a moment of relief so sharp it almost hurts. Your shoulders drop. Your hands rest in your lap, fingers slightly curled, reluctant to fully relax. The air is warmer now, and for once, the heat feels earned. Sweat cools on your skin instead of chilling you. You take a slow breath and let it out just as slowly, aware of how shallow your breathing had become earlier. This pause feels fragile, like it could be taken away at any moment. Food appears again, simple and unceremonious. The pottage you helped prepare earlier is ladled out, thick and steaming. You accept your portion with quiet gratitude. It smells familiar now. Grains, vegetables, maybe onion or leek if you're lucky. No one asks if you like it. That question doesn't exist. Medieval meals often doubled as social glue, even when the food itself was plain. Sharing from the same pot reinforced hierarchy, community, and routine. You notice where you sit, who eats first, who waits. These patterns are subtle but firm. You eat slowly, partly because the food is hot, partly because your body feels reluctant to rush anything anymore. Each spoonful settles heavily but reassuringly. This is the most comfort you felt all morning, which is both satisfying and a little alarming. Historians still argue about medieval calorie intake, whether laborers consumed enough to sustain their work or merely enough to survive it. Right now, you're not counting. You're absorbing. Energy seeps back into you gradually, like warmth returning to cold hands. Around you, conversation stirs. Not loud, not animated, but present. People exchange observations about the work, the weather, the land. No one talks about feelings. The tone is practical, grounded. You listen more than you speak, partly because you're tired, partly because it feels right. Someone nearby stretches, wincing slightly. Another rubs their knee absent-mindedly. These small gestures feel like confessions, brief acknowledgments of strain that don't linger long enough to become complaints. You mirror them unconsciously, rolling your shoulders, flexing your wrists. The pause doesn't last long. You can feel it in the way people shift their weight, in the glances toward the sun. Rest here is a checkpoint, not a destination. The day isn't half over yet, even if it feels like it should be. You take another bite, savoring the warmth more than the flavor. It's grounding. It reminds you that effort leads to sustenance, even if the ratio feels unfair. You finish your portion and sit with the fullness for a moment, letting it anchor you. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced time differently without clocks governing their days. Sitting here now, you think they felt time very clearly, through hunger, fatigue, light, and shadow. Noon is not an abstract concept. It's a physical state. You rise when others do, not wanting to be the last. Standing again is harder than sitting down was. Your legs feel thick, like they're moving through something heavier than air. You take a few careful steps, testing your balance, recalibrating. The work resumes, but with a slightly altered rhythm. The frantic edge of morning has dulled. Movements are more deliberate now, paced to conserve energy. You notice how everyone adjusts instinctively, without discussion. This is experience speaking through muscle memory. As you pick up your task again, you feel a strange mix of emotions. Relief that noon came at all. Disbelief that it took this much to get here. And a quiet, creeping realization that the rest of the day still exists. The sun will eventually dip again. Shadows will lengthen. There will be more work, more effort, more endurance. But for now, this moment, this brief alignment of light, food, and rest marks something important. You made it to noon, and yet, sitting with that fact, you understand the title of your day more clearly than ever. This isn't about collapse or failure. It's about accumulation, cold, hunger, discomfort, labor, smell, all stacking quietly until patience wears thin. You're not broken. You're just done. Mentally, emotionally, existentially done. And the afternoon hasn't even begun. As you step back into the rhythm of work, you carry that realization with you. Noon didn't save the day. It just confirmed what you already knew. Medieval life doesn't need dramatic danger to exhaust you. It just needs time. You step back into the afternoon carrying more than tools and fatigue. You carry awareness now of where you stand, literally and figuratively. Social rules wrap around you like an invisible net, guiding your movements, shaping your words, reminding you constantly that medieval life runs on hierarchy as much as labor. You notice it first in posture. Who stands upright and who keeps their head slightly bowed, who speaks freely and who waits for permission, even when the topic is as neutral as the weather. You adjust without thinking, mirroring the people around you. It's safer that way. Blending in feels like a skill you're learning in real time. Mainstream historical fact settles into place here. Medieval society was rigidly structured. Nobility, clergy, townsfolk, peasants. These weren't vague categories. They defined your legal rights, your clothing options, your diet, and the way others addressed you. Mobility between them was rare enough to be remarkable. You become hyper-aware of your clothing again, not because it's uncomfortable, though it still is, but because it signals something. The fabric, the cut, the wear all communicate your status before you say a word. No one asks what you do for a living. They can already tell. A small interaction drives the point home. You hesitate before speaking to someone higher ranked, rehearsing the tone in your head. Your voice comes out softer than usual, respectful without feeling forced. The response you get is brief but approving. You've passed some unspoken test, and the relief you feel surprises you. Sumptuary laws existed in many medieval regions, dictating who could wear what: fur, silk, certain colors. These laws weren't just about luxury, they were about visibility. Society wanted status to be instantly recognizable, no guesswork required. You glance at your sleeves and feel oddly grateful they aren't the wrong color. The rules extend beyond class. Gender roles shape the day in quieter but equally firm ways. You see who is expected to do what, who is praised for endurance, who is praised for obedience. These expectations aren't debated, they're assumed. You sense them in the division of tasks, in who speaks during meals, and who is listened to. Historians still argue whether medieval people felt trapped by these roles or simply accepted them as the natural order. Standing here now, you suspect it's both. Acceptance doesn't erase limitation. It just makes it feel less surprising. You overhear a correction, gentle but unmistakable, when someone steps slightly out of line. Not a punishment, just a reminder. The social fabric tightens, adjusts, holds. You learn quickly that most enforcement doesn't come from authority figures. It comes from everyone else. There's a constant, low-level calculation happening in your mind. How much eye contact is appropriate? When should you speak? When is silence safer? These questions run quietly in the background, adding to the fatigue. Physical labor tires your body. Social navigation tires something deeper. You think briefly of modern small talk, of awkward elevators and polite nods, and almost laugh. This is that, but with consequences. Getting it wrong doesn't mean embarrassment. It means correction, exclusion, or worse. Medieval communities were small and intensely interconnected. Reputation mattered because anonymity didn't exist. Everyone knew your family, your work ethic, your past mistakes. There was no fresh start, just a few towns over, unless you were willing to abandon everything. A strange comfort accompanies that thought. As exhausting as the scrutiny feels, it also means you're seen. You matter in a way that's tangible, even if it's constraining. Your actions ripple outward immediately. The afternoon stretches on, and you feel the weight of expectations settle more heavily as energy dips. It's harder to maintain the right tone, the right posture, the right pace. You catch yourself slouching and correct it. You bite back a sigh before it escapes. Someone nearby laughs, a brief, quiet sound. Humor exists here, but it's restrained, situational. You smile reflexively, grateful for the release. It reminds you that people aren't rules. They're navigating them too. Historians still argue about how often medieval people challenged these norms versus reinforcing them. Records show both rebellion and compliance, often from the same individuals at different moments. Right now, compliance feels easier. Survival favors it. As the sun shifts again, you feel the afternoon deepen. The social dance doesn't pause. If anything, it becomes more pronounced as fatigue lowers everyone's tolerance. Mistakes feel closer now, waiting at the edges of tiredness. You focus on your task, letting routine shield you. Work becomes a refuge from thinking too much about where you stand. Ironically, labor is the one place where expectations feel clear. Do the job. Do it well. Don't complain. Another interaction passes smoothly, then another. Each small success builds a fragile confidence. You're learning. You're adapting. You're still tired, but now you're also competent. That realization carries a hint of pride, followed quickly by a flicker of annoyance. You didn't plan on becoming good at this. You planned on enduring it. The day presses on, structured by rules you didn't choose, but now understand. And as you move through it, you realize something quietly unsettling. It's not just the cold mornings or the aching muscles that would wear you down. It's this constant awareness of your place, this invisible framework that never switches off. By now, you're not just physically over medieval life. You're socially exhausted, and the afternoon still has more to say. The first hint arrives as a dull throb you can't quite place. Not sharp enough to stop you, not dramatic enough to mention, just persistent. You try to ignore it, the way you've been ignoring everything else today, but it lingers. A tightness in your shoulder, a headache blooming slowly behind your eyes. The kind of discomfort modern life would answer with a pill and a glass of water. Here, it answers with suggestions. Medieval medicine was based largely on humoral theory, the idea that health depended on balancing 4 bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. When something felt off, it wasn't a symptom, it was an imbalance. An imbalance required correction. You hear someone mention it casually. You look a bit flushed. It's not concern as much as observation. Another voice adds, "Too much heat." A nod follows. Diagnosis complete. Common remedies included bloodletting, herbal poultices, purging, and prayers, often used together. No one asks which you prefer. Preference isn't part of the system. You flex your shoulder again, hoping movement will fix it. Instead, someone notices. Advice arrives instantly. You should rest, or bleed a little, or apply something warm, or something cold. The options contradict each other, but the certainty behind them is unwavering. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine was as ineffective as popular culture suggests. Some treatments were genuinely helpful, herbs that reduced inflammation, rest prescribed when needed. Others less so. The problem wasn't always ignorance. It was confidence without testing. You consider what you know now, germs, infections, hydration, and it all feels very far away. Here, illness is visible, social, interpreted through shared beliefs. You don't privately feel unwell. You publicly are unwell. The headache thickens, and with it, your awareness of how vulnerable discomfort makes you. Pain draws attention. Attention invites intervention. Intervention here is enthusiastic. Someone offers a remedy from a pouch. It smells earthy, sharp, unfamiliar. You hesitate just long enough to be noticed. The pause earns you a look, curious, faintly disapproving. Refusal would require explanation. Explanation would require authority you don't have. You accept it. Swallow. The taste lingers longer than you'd like. Whether it helps is almost irrelevant. Participation matters more than results. Medieval healers ranged from formally trained physicians to folk practitioners, midwives, monks, and anyone with a reputation for knowing things. Medical authority was fluid. Experience mattered. So did storytelling. You're told about someone who had a similar ache last winter, about how it worsened until a certain treatment fixed it, or until it went away on its own. The story ends with a moral you're meant to absorb, even if you're not sure what it is. The work continues, slower now. You're careful with your movements, partly to protect yourself, partly to avoid further comment. Pain becomes something you manage quietly, like everything else. You notice others doing the same, limping without mention, rubbing joints discreetly, enduring. There's a shared understanding that bodies fail regularly here. Survival depends on continuing anyway. Historians still argue how medieval people conceptualize pain, whether they tolerated it better or simply had fewer alternatives. Watching the people around you, you suspect it's the latter. When relief is uncertain, endurance becomes the default. A bell rings somewhere in the distance, marking time or prayer, or both. The sound cuts through your thoughts, grounding and slightly jarring. You pause, lean on your tool, breathe through the ache. The afternoon light has softened, but your energy hasn't returned. If anything, it's thinning. Each task requires more negotiation with your body. Each movement feels slightly heavier than the last. You think again of modern medicine, of waiting rooms and instructions and dosage labels. The clarity of it feels luxurious. Here, healing is interpretive, communal, layered with belief. Someone mentions leeches, half joking, half not. You smile politely and hope the conversation moves on. It does, thankfully, replaced by talk of weather and harvest and routine concerns. The headache recedes a little, or maybe you've just stopped noticing it. Either way, you adapt. Adaptation seems to be the theme of the day. Adapt to cold, adapt to hunger, adapt to hierarchy, adapt to pain. Some medieval remedies involved using substances that modern science later found mildly effective. Willow bark for pain, for example, which contains a precursor to aspirin. Others were symbolic, meant to realign the body through ritual rather than chemistry. Historians still argue whether belief itself played a role in recovery. Watching the confidence with which remedies are shared, you think it probably did. Hope, even misplaced, has weight. As the sun continues its slow descent, you feel the ache settle into something manageable, not gone, just quieter. You're grateful for that, grateful enough not to question it. But the experience leaves a mark, a new layer of fatigue, a subtle anxiety about what happens if something worse appears, a cut, a fever, something that can't be walked off. You push those thoughts aside and focus on the task at hand. Afternoon work demands attention, not speculation. Still, the realization lingers. Medieval life doesn't give you the luxury of minor discomfort. Everything has implications. Everything invites response. And sometimes, the response is worse than the problem. By now, the idea of being over it has deepened. It's not just impatience. It's caution, awareness, a quiet wish for fewer opinions and more certainty. You straighten, stretch carefully, and keep going. The day hasn't ended yet, and your body, whether you like it or not, is still part of the story. The noise finds you before you notice it. Not a single sound, but a layered presence that never fully recedes. Bells tolling somewhere nearby, not urgently, just insistently. Animals shifting, snorting, calling out to one another in ways that feel conversational. Voices overlapping, low, practical, constant. Even when no one is speaking directly to you, sound presses in from every direction. There is no quiet the way you understand it. Medieval towns and villages were dense, communal spaces. Homes were close together, often sharing walls. Workplaces blended into living spaces. Privacy, as a concept, barely existed. Sound traveled freely, unchecked by insulation or expectation. You become aware of how rarely you are alone. Not physically alone, not mentally alone. Even when you step aside to focus on your task, someone passes nearby. Someone hums. Someone coughs. Someone mutters to themselves. The world feels occupied at all times. You try to tune it out, the way you might ignore background noise in a cafe. But this isn't background. It's foreground, middle ground, and everything else. Your senses don't get to rest. They stay switched on, scanning, adjusting. A quirky tidbit drifts in as you listen. Medieval bells weren't just for church services. They marked time, warned of danger, announced deaths, celebrated births, signaled meetings. Bells were the town's notification system. You imagine living inside a phone that never goes on silent. One rings now, and conversation pauses instinctively. Not in panic, more in acknowledgement. You don't know what this particular bell means yet, but your body reacts anyway, a small tightening of attention. Sound here carries authority. You notice how voices change depending on who is nearby. Louder when speaking to equals, softer upward, sharper downward. Tone does as much work as words. You listen carefully, learning without realizing it. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced sensory overload or whether their brains adapted to constant stimulation. Standing here, you suspect adaptation is doing most of the work. The noise hasn't lessened. You've just stopped fighting it. Animals add their own layer. Chickens cluck impatiently. A dog barks once, twice, then settles. Somewhere close, a pig makes a sound that feels almost judgmental. You smile faintly despite yourself. Even the animals seem opinionated. There's no escaping it indoors either. Buildings trap sound in unexpected ways. Voices echo off wooden beams. Footsteps thud overhead. Fires crackle and pop. Someone nearby sharpens a tool, the scrape rhythmic and unignorable. You think of modern walls, headphones, closed doors. The luxury of choosing when to engage. Here, engagement is default. Withdrawal requires effort and often explanation. You catch yourself craving silence the way you craved food earlier. Not dramatic silence, just a moment where nothing demands your attention. But even as the thought forms, it feels unrealistic, like wishing the sky would turn off for a while. Another bell rings, farther away this time. Its sound overlaps with the first, creating a brief dissonance before fading. Time passes in sound waves, not minutes. Medieval people didn't experience time as a steady tick, but as a series of audible cues. Without personal clocks, sound structured the day. Bells told you when to wake, work, pray, eat, rest. Silence didn't mean peace, it meant uncertainty. A voice nearby laughs suddenly, surprising you. You jump slightly, then relax. Your nerves feel closer to the surface now. Fatigue has thinned your tolerance. Every unexpected sound lands harder. You shift your weight, trying to find a position where the noise feels less intrusive. It doesn't work. Sound isn't directional here. It's ambient, immersive. Historians still argue whether medieval communities valued communal noise as a sign of life and safety. A quiet town could mean trouble, illness, abandonment, danger. Noise meant people were present, working, surviving. Listening to it now, you understand that logic, even if your modern instincts resist it. Someone calls out a name, not yours, thankfully. The call echoes, answered by another voice from somewhere unseen. Information travels this way, carried by lungs and intention. Efficient, inescapable. You try focusing on a single sound, the scrape of your tool, the rhythm of your breathing, but others intrude. A conversation drifts closer, then away. A cart rattles past, wheels protesting every stone. Your mind wanders briefly to libraries, to soft rooms, to the way quiet feels like being wrapped in something gentle. The contrast is sharp enough to make you sigh, and even that sound feels louder than it should. Quirky tidbit: medieval complaints about noise do exist in historical records. People argued over crowing roosters, ringing bells, loud neighbors. Even then, people wanted peace. They just had fewer ways to achieve it. You catch someone glancing at you, perhaps noticing your expression. You smooth it out quickly. No need to draw attention. No need to explain that your ears are tired. The afternoon wears on, and the sounds shift subtly. Work noises change rhythm. Voices lower slightly. The bell intervals stretch. The day's energy begins to slope downward, audible in the slower pace of everything. You realize that noise here isn't just sound, it's connection, it's surveillance, it's reassurance and pressure at the same time. Being heard means being known. Being known means being accountable. Historians still argue whether medieval people ever truly felt alone. Solitude existed, but it was rare and often intentional. Pilgrims, hermits, shepherds on distant hills. For most, life was shared by default. As the light softens, you feel a quiet longing for the end of the day. Not because things are terrible, but because constant presence is exhausting in a way you hadn't anticipated. Your body aches, yes, but your mind feels crowded. You take a deeper breath, letting the sounds wash over you instead of resisting them. Acceptance feels easier than control. The noise doesn't stop, but it becomes less sharp at the edges. Still, you know this. Even if you could rest your body completely, the world around you would keep humming. Bells would ring, animals would stir, voices would rise and fall. There is no mute button on medieval life. And by now, you understand that survival here isn't about strength alone. It's about endurance, of cold, of labor, of rules, of pain, and of constant, unavoidable sound. You keep working, moving with the rhythm of the place, letting the noise carry you forward, whether you like it or not. The day continues. The weather makes its presence known without asking your permission. It shifts subtly at first. A breeze that wasn't there earlier, a cloud drifting across the sun and dulling the warmth, just enough to notice. You pause, not because you want to, but because everyone else does. Heads tilt upward, eyes narrow slightly. The sky is being consulted. Mainstream historical fact settles in. Medieval life was governed by weather to an extent that's difficult to imagine now. Without reliable forecasts, insulation, or climate control, the environment wasn't a backdrop. It was an active participant. Rain didn't inconvenience the day. It was the day. The breeze strengthens, cool fingers slipping through the weave of your clothing. That wool you cursed earlier suddenly feels thin. You resist the urge to pull it tighter, copying the stillness of those around you. No one complains. Complaining doesn't change clouds. You resume work, but the rhythm feels altered. Movements are more cautious now, paced with an awareness of what might be coming. Tools are adjusted, materials shifted. Someone murmurs something about rain later. No one argues. A quirky tidbit floats into your awareness. Medieval people were remarkably skilled at reading weather signs. Wind direction, bird behavior, cloud shapes. This wasn't superstition alone. It was observation honed by necessity. You glance upward again, trying to see what they see. Historians still argue how accurate these methods were compared to chance, but accuracy matters less than preparedness. The weather might be wrong, but ignoring it is never an option. The sky darkens slightly, enough to cool the air, but not enough to threaten yet. This in-between state is somehow worse. You don't know whether to brace for rain or keep hoping for sun. Uncertainty lingers, stretching your nerves thin. You feel it in your hands first. Fingers stiffen as the temperature drops. Grip weakens. You flex them, trying to keep blood moving. Gloves would help, you think automatically, then remember how absurd that thought is here. Another historical fact drifts in. Medieval clothing was layered for adaptability, but it had limits. Wool retained warmth even when wet, which made it valuable, but once soaked, it became heavy and slow. Rain wasn't just uncomfortable, it was exhausting. A cloud finally breaks, releasing a brief scatter of droplets, not enough to soak you, just enough to confirm the threat. People move more quickly now, not panicked, just efficient. Tools are repositioned. Work that can wait, waits. You follow along, grateful not to be making decisions. The wind carries the scent of damp earth, sharp and grounding. It reminds you that everything here, food, shelter, routine, depends on this cycle you can't control. Historians still argue whether medieval communities saw weather as divine communication or natural pattern. Often, it was both. A storm could be explained by pressure systems or by displeasure from above. Either way, it demanded respect. The rain doesn't commit. It hovers, teasing, falling, and stopping in uneven intervals. This is somehow more irritating than a full downpour. You can't settle into acceptance. You stay tense, ready to react. Your shoulders hunch slightly against the chill. Muscles tighten again, undoing whatever relief noon brought. Fatigue returns, quieter but persistent. Weather has a way of reopening old discomforts. Someone nearby jokes softly about the sky's indecision. You smile, appreciating the attempt. Humor here feels like a small rebellion, a way to assert control where none exists. The breeze picks up again, carrying leaves and dust. You blink, eyes watering briefly. The world feels more exposed now, less forgiving. Shade disappears. Warmth flickers. Another quirky detail surfaces. Medieval roads often became nearly impassable after rain, turning to thick mud that slowed travel to a crawl. You glance down at the ground and imagine it transformed, clinging to boots, refusing to let go. Historians still argue how often weather altered historical events, battles delayed, harvests ruined, migrations forced. Standing here, you don't think it altered life occasionally. You think it shaped it constantly. The light shifts again as the cloud moves on, sun returning weakly. Relief spreads through the group, subtle but real. You straighten a little, warmth creeping back into your hands. But the uncertainty remains. Weather doesn't apologize. It just moves on, leaving you to adjust. You resume work fully now, but with caution. Every movement feels slightly more deliberate, as if conserving energy against whatever might come next. The sky has reminded you who's in charge. The afternoon stretches longer under this watchful atmosphere. You feel smaller somehow, not diminished, just aware. A person among elements. Modern life insulates you from this constant negotiation. Here, you negotiate every hour, sometimes every minute. Historians still argue whether this closeness to nature fostered resilience or resignation. Watching the way people around you adapt without comment, you suspect it fostered both. The wind dies down eventually, the clouds thin, the threat passes, for now. Work continues, but something has shifted. The weather has inserted itself into your thoughts, another variable to track. You realize that exhaustion here isn't just physical, or social, or sensory. It's environmental. You are always responding, always adjusting. By now, the idea of being over it feels almost quaint. This isn't a single irritation. It's a layered experience, Cold, noise, rules, pain, and now the sky itself weighing in. You look up one more time, scanning the horizon like everyone else. The sun's descent is noticeable now. Shadows stretch. Evening approaches. Relief stirs faintly in your chest. Not rest yet, but the promise of it. The weather has had its say today, reminding you that medieval life doesn't pause for comfort. It flows with the elements, whether you're ready or not. You lower your gaze, return to your task, and keep going, because that's what the day requires, and because stopping, here, is never as simple as wanting to. By now, a low unease has settled into you, not sharp enough to call fear, but constant enough to color everything. It hums beneath your thoughts as steadily as the bells did earlier. This is the awareness of rules, not the clear written kind you're used to, but the lived, interpreted ones. Laws here feel close, personal, and occasionally unpredictable. You don't see them posted anywhere. You feel them instead, in the way people hesitate before acting, in how voices drop when certain topics surface. Authority isn't always visible, but it's always implied. Mainstream historical fact eases into place. Medieval law varied drastically by region, lord, and custom. There was no single, unified legal code governing daily life. Instead, law was a patchwork of local traditions, manorial courts, religious rules, and personal discretion. Justice depended heavily on who you were and who was watching. You become aware of how often you check yourself. A glance before stepping somewhere unfamiliar. A pause before touching something that isn't yours. You're not even sure what you're avoiding. Only that caution feels wise. A small incident unfolds nearby. Someone argues quietly over a boundary, a tool, a task. Nothing dramatic, but the tension is immediate. Others notice. The conversation stops. Eyes turn, not to intervene, but to observe. You hold still, heart ticking slightly faster. No one raises their voice. No one needs to. The disagreement resolves itself with a muttered concession. Relief spreads, quiet and collective. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your thoughts. Medieval punishments were often public, not necessarily severe, but visible. Stocks, fines, shaming rituals. The goal wasn't cruelty. It was correction through community awareness. You understand now why that works. Attention itself is a consequence. Historians still argue whether medieval justice systems were more arbitrary or more restorative than modern ones. Some records suggest mediation and compromise were preferred. Others reveal stark inequality. Standing here, you suspect both are true, depending on the day and the people involved. You notice how carefully everyone stays within invisible lines. No one rushes. No one lingers where they shouldn't. Movement itself seems regulated by custom. You imagine accidentally breaking a rule you don't know exists. The thought tightens your chest briefly. There's no handbook here. Learning happens through watching, and mistakes are memorable. Another historical fact drifts in. Many medieval courts relied on reputation and oath-taking. Truth was often established through character witnesses rather than evidence as you'd recognize it. Being known mattered. Being trusted mattered more. That realization reframes the day you've been having. Every small interaction, your tone, your posture, your compliance, is part of a record you didn't know you were keeping. The exhaustion deepens. A figure passes nearby. Someone whose presence subtly alters the atmosphere. Not dramatic, just authoritative. Conversations adjust. Movement slows slightly. Respect is shown without announcement. You lower your gaze instinctively, then feel faintly annoyed with yourself for doing so. The feeling passes quickly. Survival instincts tend to win these arguments. Historians still argue how conscious medieval people were of living under constant authority versus seeing it as background. For you, coming from elsewhere, it feels loud. For them, perhaps it was just air. The afternoon continues, shadows lengthening. The light now has a slant to it, gentler but more revealing. Dust motes float visibly, Everything feels exposed. You take extra care with your work now, not wanting to draw attention. Mistakes happen, but attention is optional. You aim for the latter. Some medieval laws were enforced only when convenient, ignored until they weren't. This unpredictability kept people cautious. Rules didn't need to be strict if their application was uncertain. You notice how often people glance around before speaking, even casually. Information carries weight here. Words can travel faster than you expect. A brief sound, raised voices somewhere farther off, makes you tense again. It fades quickly. No explanation follows. Life resumes. But the reminder lingers. You realize that by this point in the day, your mental energy is nearly spent. Navigating labor, weather, noise, pain, and now law has layered your thoughts until they feel thick. Modern life often separates these pressures. Here, they overlap constantly. Historians still argue whether medieval communities felt safer or more constrained by this closeness. Watching the way people move, alert but calm, you think safety and constraint might have been the same thing. The sun lowers further. The authoritative figure moves on. The tension softens. You exhale without realizing you are holding your breath. Relief doesn't come from the absence of rules, but from familiarity with them. You survived another stretch without misstep. That feels like an achievement, even if it shouldn't. And yet, the thought returns, clearer now than before. It's not the threat of punishment that wears you down. It's the vigilance, the constant self-monitoring, the effort of staying aligned with expectations you didn't choose. By now, noon feels like a lifetime ago. You've moved past annoyance into something quieter, resignation mixed with competence. You know how to stand, how to speak, how to work, how to stay out of trouble. And that knowledge, hard-earned in a single day, weighs heavier than any tool you've lifted. The light continues to fade. Evening draws closer. The rules don't loosen, but they soften at the edges as fatigue spreads evenly across everyone. Soon, you think. Not rest yet, but soon. For now, you keep your head down, your movements careful, and your presence unremarkable. In medieval life, that counts as success. The hunger returns quietly at first, the way an old annoyance slips back into the room once you've stopped watching it. It's not sharp like the morning hunger was. This one is dull, insistent, layered over fatigue rather than urgency. You notice it when your movements slow a fraction too much, when your thoughts drift between tasks, when the smell of anything remotely edible seems to linger longer than it should. Mainstream historical fact settles in without ceremony. Medieval people often ate only 2 main meals a day, with timing dependent on season, labor, and custom. Snacks, as you know them, weren't really a thing. Eating again meant waiting, sometimes for hours, and there was very little negotiation involved. You swallow and keep working. The midday pottage did its job, but it wasn't built to last. It sustained, not satisfied. Your body used it efficiently and then asked, politely at first, for more. The afternoon light has softened into something golden and tired. Shadows stretch across the ground like they're trying to leave early. You envy them. Every step feels a little heavier now, not dramatically, just enough to register. A quirky tidbit slips into your awareness. Medieval workers sometimes chewed on bits of bread or grain during long stretches, not as a formal meal, but as a way to quiet hunger. It wasn't indulgent. It was strategic. You look around briefly, wondering if that option exists for you. It doesn't. You focus instead on the rhythm of the work. Repetition helps. Muscle memory carries you through tasks that would feel impossible if you had to think about them too much. Hunger hums beneath everything, not loud enough to interrupt, but persistent enough to shape your mood. Historians still argue how widespread undernourishment was in medieval populations. Some evidence suggests people were adequately fed during good years. Other evidence points to chronic calorie deficits, especially during hard seasons. Right now, Your body doesn't care about averages, it cares about now. You notice how people's patience thins slightly as the afternoon deepens. Instructions are shorter, corrections sharper. No one snaps outright, but the edges are there. Hunger doesn't make people cruel. It makes them efficient with their energy. Someone nearby shifts their stance and exhales slowly, a sound that feels heavier than it should. You recognize it immediately. That's the sigh of someone running on empty. Another historical fact drifts in. Medieval diets were heavily carbohydrate-based, bread, grains, porridge, because they were filling and affordable. Protein existed, but not consistently for everyone. The result was a steady energy curve rather than spikes. Even so, long days stretched that curve thin. Your stomach tightens again. You adjust your grip, try to ignore it. Hunger here isn't a problem to solve. It's a condition to manage. You think briefly of modern habits, grabbing something quick, eating without ceremony, fueling on demand. The contrast feels absurdly indulgent. Here, eating is an event, not a convenience. Historians still argue whether medieval people felt hunger as keenly or simply accepted it as background. Watching the way no one mentions it, you suspect acceptance was learned early. The light continues its slow descent. The sun sits lower now, angled, casting everything in warm tones that almost make the exhaustion feel intentional, like the day is trying to soften its own impact. You notice the smell of food beginning to drift faintly from somewhere. Not enough to promise anything immediate, but enough to remind you that eating will happen eventually. Your body responds instantly, a quiet surge of anticipation. A quirky detail surfaces. In many medieval households, evening meals were communal and structured, reinforcing hierarchy even in rest. You wonder where you'll sit, what you'll be given, how hungry you'll be by then. The work finally begins to wind down, not abruptly, but gradually. Tasks conclude. Tools are set aside. Movements slow. There's no announcement. Everyone simply knows. Relief spreads through you in small increments. Not joy, just release. Your shoulders drop slightly. Your breathing deepens. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced evenings as rest or simply as a different kind of labor. Cooking, tending animals, maintaining fires, all continued, but the pace shifted, and pace matters. As you walk toward whatever comes next, hunger sharpens briefly, reacting to the promise of food. You feel it more clearly now, no longer distracted by work. You arrive at the space where the evening meal is prepared. The air is warmer here, heavier with scent. Grain, vegetables, smoke. It's not luxurious, but it's real. You wait. Waiting is part of this too. When food is finally served, it feels almost ceremonial, even if no one treats it that way. You take your portion carefully, aware again of where you stand. The bowl is warm in your hands. That alone feels comforting. You eat slowly, not out of restraint, but because your body seems to want to stretch the moment. Each bite grounds you. The hunger recedes, not completely, but enough to quiet the noise. Mainstream historical fact returns. Meals were often eaten in silence or low conversation, with gratitude implied rather than spoken. You follow suit, letting the warmth settle. The day's fatigue presses in now, heavier than before. Eating doesn't energize you so much as confirm how tired you are. Your muscles relax, and with that relaxation comes the urge to stop. Historians still argue whether medieval people slept more deeply due to physical exhaustion or simply had fewer distractions. Sitting here now, you suspect exhaustion plays a significant role. You finish eating and sit for a moment, bowl empty, hands resting in your lap. The light outside has dimmed noticeably. Evening has arrived. The hunger is gone, replaced by a thick, spreading weariness. You feel it in your bones, in the way your thoughts slow, in how even irritation feels like too much effort. You realize something quietly, without drama. This is the point modern you would call it a day. You'd go home, disengage, rest your mind. Here, the day has merely shifted modes. And yet, despite that, despite everything, You feel a strange sense of completion. You made it through cold, labor, hunger, rules, noise, weather, pain. You didn't thrive, you endured. And right now, with evening settling around you, that feels like enough. Evening doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in slowly, like the day is reluctant to fully let go of you. The light fades, but not dramatically. It softens, stretches, thins. Shadows lengthen until they touch each other, and eventually everything seems to exist in the same muted tone. Your body notices before your mind does. Muscles loosen without permission. Your steps shorten. The urgency that pushed you through the afternoon finally drains away, leaving behind something heavier but calmer. This is not energy returning. This is resignation settling in. Mainstream historical fact eases into the moment. Medieval evenings were structured but subdued. Without artificial lighting beyond candles and hearth fires, activity naturally slowed after sunset. Darkness wasn't something you fought. It was something you accommodated. You moved toward wherever you'll spend the night, guided more by habit than decision. The space is familiar enough now. Low ceilings, rough surfaces, the smell of smoke clinging to everything. You've stopped reacting to it. That alone feels like progress. A quirky tidbit drifts through your thoughts. Medieval people often went to bed earlier than modern schedules suggest, but sleep itself was fragmented. Many practiced first sleep and second sleep, waking briefly in the middle of the night. Right now, that feels like a future problem. You can barely think past sitting down. You lower yourself carefully, joints protesting quietly. Sitting feels different in the evening. It's no longer a pause between tasks. It's a signal. Your body understands what's coming, even if your mind is still catching up. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced evenings as peaceful or simply as a lack of options. Watching the way everyone settles without question, you think peace might have been defined differently. Peace here is the absence of demand. The sounds soften, not disappear, but change. Voices drop, movements slow. The bell doesn't ring now. It has nothing left to announce. Animals settle. Fire becomes the loudest thing in the room, crackling steadily, predictably. You notice how little conversation there is. Not because people are unfriendly, but because they're finished. Words cost energy, and energy is gone. Silence here feels earned. You stretch your legs out slightly, then pull them back in when you realize space is shared. Old habits linger, even at the end of the day. You adjust, finding a position that doesn't draw attention and doesn't aggravate your aches. Mainstream fact returns. Bedding in medieval life was simple: straw mattresses, wool blankets, shared sleeping spaces. Comfort existed, but it was relative. Right now, even the idea of lying down feels luxurious. Your mind drifts back over the day, not in detail, but in impressions: cold, hunger, noise, rules, pain, weather, hunger again. Each one felt manageable on its own. Together, they formed something heavier. Historians still argue whether medieval life felt harsh to those living it or simply normal. Sitting here now, you realize the truth is probably quieter than either answer. Normal doesn't mean easy. It just means familiar. A faint irritation surfaces, an almost laughable thought. You didn't even get to noon before feeling done. And yet, you made it to evening. There's a grim satisfaction in that. Someone nearby shifts, settling into sleep already. Another stares into the fire, eyes unfocused. You follow their gaze, letting the flickering light hold your attention. Firelight has a way of smoothing thoughts, rounding their edges. Your breathing slows, not intentionally. It just does. You think about tomorrow, briefly, then immediately decide not to. Tomorrow belongs to tomorrow. Today has taken enough. A quirky detail slips in as your thoughts loosen. Medieval people often slept clothed, not out of modesty alone, but for warmth and readiness. You imagine doing the same, and for once, it doesn't feel inconvenient. It feels practical. Historians still argue whether constant readiness created anxiety or security. Right now, You feel neither. You feel empty in the best possible way. The idea settles fully now, clear and undeniable. You were already over medieval life by noon, not because of danger, not because of drama, but because the day asks too much, too steadily, without apology. It doesn't care how you feel. It only cares that you continue. And yet, you did. You adjust your position one last time. The ground is hard. The air is cool. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. But you're here. The day is ending. The fire dims slightly as someone tends it. Shadows deepen. The room grows quieter still. Your eyelids feel heavy now, pulling downward like gravity has doubled. Thoughts slow, stretching out, dissolving before they finish forming. The world shrinks to simple sensations. Warmth on your face, the roughness beneath you, the steady sound of breathing around you. No more rules to navigate tonight. No work to finish. No hunger to manage. Just rest, however imperfect. You let yourself sink into it, not caring how you look, not caring what tomorrow brings. For now, medieval life has loosened its grip, and that is enough. The fire continues to crackle softly, each sound blending into the next until it feels less like noise and more like rhythm. You don't try to follow it. You let it pass over you the way the day did, only gentler now. Your breathing evens out, slow and deep. With every exhale, the weight of the day slips a little farther away. The cold you noticed this morning no longer matters. The hunger has faded. The rules are quiet. The sky is dark and finished with its demands. You are allowed to stop. The space around you feels smaller, safer, contained by shadow and warmth. Muscles release their last bit of tension. Your hands rest where they fall, fingers loose, no longer gripping anything at all. Thoughts drift in and out without urgency. A flicker of light, a distant sound, then nothing. Sleep doesn't arrive suddenly. It settles, gently, like a blanket laid over you piece by piece. You don't resist it. There's no reason to. The day is complete. You've done enough. You are done. End of script. Sweet dreams.